They said she was being sold to pay her husband's debt. That's what the crowd believed. That's what the men were bidding for. A desperate woman, a broken life, a price to be claimed. But Lydia Owens wasn't trembling because she had been sold. She was trembling because if the wrong man bought her, he would find something she had spent weeks trying to hide. And when a quiet cowboy stepped forward and paid $500, he had no idea he was stepping into something dangerous. The wind cut sharp across the dusty town square of Sheridan, Wyoming, April 1878. It carried grit through the air and tugged at Lydia's dress as she stood beside the rough wooden post. Her hands were bound loosely in front of her, not tight enough to stop her from moving, just tight enough to remind everyone she had no choice. A few days ago she had been a wife, respectable, proper, invisible in the way most women were expected to be. Now she stood in the open square like livestock. Men gathered in a loose circle, boots scraping, voices low, eyes watching, measuring, judging. Lydia kept her chin lifted, but her fingers trembled, not from the cold, from the fear of being recognized. Frank Chambers, the auctioneer, stepped forward and cleared his throat. "Next lot," he called, his voice cutting through the wind. "Mrs. Lydia Owens, to be sold in settlement of her husband's debt." A ripple moved through the crowd. Not shock, not outrage, just interest. Lydia swallowed. Her husband's name felt like ash in her mouth. Thomas Owens. Gone. 3 nights ago. Vanished after losing more money than he could ever repay. He hadn't taken her with him. He hadn't warned her. He hadn't even looked back. He had simply signed his name and left her behind to settle what he owed. Frank lifted his hand. "Bidding starts at $50. "50," a voice called immediately. Lydia closed her eyes. She knew that voice. Wilbur Simmons, the brothel owner. If he won... No. She forced the thought away. 60, 75, 80. The numbers rose casually, like men arguing over cattle weight. Lydia's grip tightened around the rope at her wrists. Her pulse pounded in her ears, but her mind wasn't on the bidding. It was on the small, folded paper hidden inside the lining of her sleeve. Still there, still safe. For now. 100! The new voice cut through the others. Calm, steady. Lydia's eyes opened. The crowd shifted slightly, heads turning. At the edge of the square, a man leaned against a hitching post. Tall, broad-shouldered, worn leather vest, hat low over his eyes. He didn't look like the others. No hunger, no amusement, no impatience. Just stillness. 125, Simmons snapped, irritation creeping into his voice. The stranger straightened. 300. The square went silent, completely. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Frank blinked. 300? Simmons stepped forward. 350. The stranger didn't even look at him. 500. This time, no one spoke. $500. It wasn't just a bid, it was a statement. Lydia stared at him, her heart no longer racing, but tightening. Because men didn't spend that kind of money without expecting something in return. Frank swallowed hard. 500 going once, going twice. The gavel struck. Sold! The stranger pushed away from the post and began walking toward her. Slow, measured steps, spurs ringing softly against the packed dirt. Lydia's breath caught, not from fear alone, from uncertainty. Because for the first time since this began, she wasn't sure which outcome was worse. As he stopped in front of her, he lifted his head, and she saw his eyes clearly. Blue, calm, unreadable. "My name is Heath Vance," he said quietly. His voice didn't carry like the others, but it didn't need to. "I think we should talk somewhere quieter, Mrs." Lydia hesitated, only for a second. Then she nodded. Because whatever this man wanted, it was already too late to refuse. And deep inside, she knew one thing for certain. If he ever discovered what she was hiding, everything would change. The dining room of the Sheridan Hotel was nearly empty at that hour. A single lamp burned low above their table, casting soft light across the polished wood. Outside, the wind still moved through the streets, but in here, everything felt strangely still. Lydia sat with both hands wrapped around a cup of tea. The warmth seeped slowly into her fingers, but it did nothing to steady her thoughts. Across from her, Heath Vance removed his hat and set it beside him. His movements were unhurried, controlled, like a man who never needed to prove anything. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but heavy. Finally, Lydia found her voice. "You paid $500, she said quietly. Her eyes lifted to meet his. "What exactly do you expect in return?" Heath didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into the inner pocket of his vest. He pulled out the folded bill of sale, the paper that had just defined her life. Lydia's chest tightened. Her fingers curled slightly around the teacup. Heath looked down at the document for a moment, then back at her. "What happened in that square," he said slowly, "should never have happened." Before she could react, he tore the paper in half. Then again and again. The sound was soft, but it echoed louder than the auctioneer's gavel. He dropped the torn pieces onto the table. "You're free." Lydia didn't move, didn't speak. Her mind struggled to catch up with the words. "Free?" she whispered. Heath nodded once. "You can go wherever you want. I'll cover your expenses if you need to leave town." The room seemed to tilt slightly around her. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Freedom. After everything. After humiliation. After fear. After being reduced to a price. It felt unreal. "Why?" she asked softly. Heath leaned back in his chair. "Because someone should have stepped in sooner." His gaze held hers steadily. "And because no one deserves to be owned." Something inside Lydia shifted. Not fully, not safely, but enough. Her eyes dropped briefly to the table, to the torn pieces of paper, then to her sleeve. Just for a second. Heath noticed. Not the reason, not yet, but the movement, the hesitation. "You're not planning to leave," he said quietly. Lydia looked up again, caught. She hesitated, then shook her head slightly. "No." Heath's brow furrowed just enough to show curiosity. "You don't want to stay in Sheridan," he said. "That much is clear. So why not go?" Lydia's fingers tightened around the cup again. Because leaving meant being seen, being followed. Because wherever she went, the past might still find her. "I don't think I'd be safe on my own," she said carefully. It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. Heath studied her, long enough to make her wonder what he saw. Then he nodded once. "I own a ranch," he said, "near the Montana border. North Star Ranch. I need a housekeeper." Lydia blinked. "A job?" "A fair one," Heath replied. "You'd have your own cabin. Food. Pay. And no one there will treat you like you were treated today." Lydia's chest rose slowly, fell, rose again. A way out, a real one. But safety wasn't just about distance, it was about what she carried with her. Her hand drifted, almost unconsciously, toward her sleeve again. Still there, still hidden. If she went with him, she wouldn't be alone. And maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to run. "How far?" she asked. 3 days' ride. Lydia looked down at the table one last time, at the torn paper, at the life that had just ended. Then she looked up at him, into those steady blue eyes. "I'll come with you," she said softly. Heath nodded. "Good." Outside, the wind continued to move through the streets of Sheridan, but for Lydia Owens, the direction of her life had already begun to change. That the danger she carried with her was now riding with them both. They left Sheridan before sunrise. The town still slept beneath a pale gray sky when Heath saddled the horses in silence. Frost clung lightly to the ground. The air was sharp, clean. Lydia mounted the chestnut mare he had chosen for her. Gentle, steady, nothing like the chaos she had left behind. She did not look back, not at the square, not at the streets, not at the life that had ended. Because some places were easier to forget if you never turned around. They rode west first, then north, the trail winding through open plains that stretched endlessly beneath the waking sky. For a long while neither of them spoke, only the sound of hooves against dirt, the creak of leather, the quiet rhythm of distance growing. Lydia let herself breathe, slowly, carefully. But even here, even with miles between her and Sheridan, she did not feel entirely safe. Her fingers brushed lightly against her sleeve. Still there. The folded paper pressed faintly against her skin. Hidden, unseen, but not forgotten. "Something on your mind?" Heath's voice broke the silence. Lydia looked up. He was watching the horizon, but she knew the question wasn't about the land. "No," she said softly, then added, "Just thinking." He nodded, didn't press. That, more than anything, unsettled her, because most men would have demanded answers. He simply gave her space. Around midday, they stopped near a narrow stream lined with cottonwoods. The water moved clear over smooth stones. The horses drank eagerly. Heath handed her a small bundle. Bread, jerky, simple. "You ride well," he said. "I used to," Lydia replied. "Before." She didn't finish. He didn't ask her to. They ate in quiet, the wind soft through the trees, the kind of stillness that felt earned. But as Lydia reached to take a drink from the canteen, something slipped. Barely noticeable, but enough. The edge of the folded paper peeked from inside her sleeve. Heath saw it. Just for a second, a glimpse, nothing more. But it didn't belong. Not to a woman who claimed to have nothing. He said nothing, just watched as Lydia quickly adjusted her sleeve. Too quickly, too carefully. They resumed riding. The land began to change. Rolling hills giving way to thicker grass, patches of pine rising along the distant slopes. But the silence between them had shifted. Not broken, just different. Later that afternoon, Heath slowed his horse. He turned slightly in the saddle, listening. "What is it?" Lydia asked. He didn't answer immediately. Then, "Tracks," he said. Her stomach tightened. "Animal?" she asked. He shook his head. "Horse. Recent." Lydia's pulse quickened. She forced herself to look ahead, to keep her voice steady. "Could be anyone." "Could be," Heath agreed, but he didn't sound convinced. They rode on, faster now, the quiet ease of the morning gone. By dusk they reached a small way station, a rough building, lantern light glowing faintly through its windows. Inside, the warmth wrapped around them, the smell of stew, wood smoke, travelers speaking in low voices. Lydia stayed close, closer than before, as if the walls themselves offered protection. That night, she lay awake on the narrow bed in her room, eyes open, listening. Every sound felt louder in the dark, every creak, every step. Her hand slipped beneath her sleeve again. She pulled the folded paper free, just enough to see it, not enough to unfold it. Ink lines faintly visible, names, numbers, something important, something dangerous, something men might kill for. She pressed it back into place, hidden again. Outside, the wind moved softly through the night, but Lydia knew it wasn't just the wind following them anymore. And somewhere out there, someone was riding the same trail. They left the way station before dawn. The sky was still dark when Heath saddled the horses. No wasted time, no unnecessary movement. Something had changed. Lydia felt it too, not just in the air, but in him. He rode ahead now, slightly faster, more alert, eyes scanning the horizon more often than before. And Lydia, she no longer pretended not to understand why. They had been followed. Whether by chance or by intent, she already knew the answer. By midday, the land had begun to rise into low ridges. Pine trees thickened along the slopes. The trail narrowed, less open, less forgiving. Heath slowed suddenly, then raised his hand. They stopped. "What is it?" Lydia asked quietly. He didn't look at her, his gaze fixed on the ground ahead. "2 riders," he said. "Maybe 3. Her chest tightened. "How can you tell?" He pointed toward the dirt. Spacing. Weight. Pattern. He finally turned to look at her. And they're not trying to hide. Silence settled between them, heavy, because now there was no pretending. "Do you know them?" he asked. Lydia looked away, toward the trees, toward anything but him. "I don't know who they are," she said, but her voice wasn't steady. Heath studied her, long enough, careful enough. "You're not telling me everything," he said. Not accusing, not angry, just certain. Lydia closed her eyes briefly, because she had known this moment would come. "I didn't lie," she said, "but I didn't tell you everything." He waited, didn't interrupt, didn't rush her. That made it harder, not easier. Slowly, she reached into her sleeve. This time, she didn't hide it. She pulled the folded paper free. Her hands trembled as she held it. "My husband," she began. "He didn't just lose money. He was working with men in Cheyenne and Denver. Illegal deals, land, bank loans, false accounts." She swallowed. "They kept records. And when everything started to fall apart, he gave them up." Heath's eyes narrowed slightly. Gave them up how? Lydia looked down at the paper, then back at him. "He wrote everything down. Names, numbers, where the money went. And then he disappeared." Silence. The weight of it settled in, slow, heavy. "You have it," Heath said, not a question. Lydia nodded. "He left it behind. And when those men realized, they came looking." Her voice dropped. "They didn't care about the debt. They cared about this." She held the paper tighter. "And if they find me, they won't ask questions." The wind moved through the trees, soft, cold. Heath exhaled slowly. Then he made his decision, without hesitation. "We're not stopping again," he said. "We ride straight through." Lydia looked up. "You still want me with you?" A flicker of something crossed his face. Not doubt, not fear, resolve. "I bought you out of that square to give you a choice," he said. "That hasn't changed. But if you stay with me, then whatever's coming comes for both of us." Lydia held his gaze, her fear still there, but no longer alone. "I'm not running anymore," she said. Heath nodded once. "That makes two of us." They turned their horses back toward the trail, faster now, purpose in every movement. Behind them, far beyond the ridge, dust lifted faintly into the air. 3 riders closing the distance. And ahead, the North Star Ranch waited. They reached the North Star at sunset. Golden light stretched across the valley. The ranch stood quiet, strong, unchanged. But something in the air had shifted. Heath didn't slow as they rode in, didn't call out, didn't relax. Martha stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. Her expression brightened, then faded when she saw Heath's face. "Trouble?" she asked. Heath nodded once. "Inside." Within minutes, the ranch moved. Quiet, efficient. Men checked rifles, doors secured, lanterns dimmed. No panic, just preparation. Lydia stood just inside the doorway of the main house. Her fingers curled lightly at her sides. This place had begun to feel like safety. Now danger had followed her here. "You stay close tonight," Heath said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. "I will," she answered. Night came slowly. The sky deepened into blue, then black, and with it, silence. Until hoofbeats. Faint at first, then clearer, closer. Lydia's breath caught. "They found us." Heath stepped forward onto the porch, rifle in hand, calm, steady. 3 riders emerged from the darkness, stopping just beyond the fence line, their horses restless, their silhouettes sharp against the moonlight. One of them spoke. "You've got something that don't belong to you," he called. His voice was smooth, cold. Heath didn't move. "Then you'd best be more specific." A pause, then, "Woman you brought from Sheridan." Lydia felt her heart hammer against her ribs. Heath's voice didn't change. "She's under my protection." A low laugh drifted across the yard. "That's so. Then you're in the middle of something you don't understand." Heath lifted the rifle slightly. Not threatening, not aggressive, just clear. "I understand enough. She stays." Silence stretched, tight. Then a movement. One of the riders shifted, and Heath fired. The shot cracked through the night, sharp, final. It hit the dirt just in front of the man's horse. The animal reared slightly, snorting, a warning, nothing more. The 3 riders stilled. They looked at him differently now, not as an obstacle, as a man who meant what he said. "You're making a mistake," the leader called. Heath didn't lower the rifle. "Then ride away and let me keep making it." Another pause, longer this time. Then slowly the riders turned. No threats, no final words, just retreat. Because men like that, they understood one thing: resolve. The sound of hooves faded into the distance, and the night returned, quiet again. Heath lowered the rifle, only then, only when they were gone. Behind him, Lydia stepped onto the porch. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. He turned to her. "Yes," he said, "I did." She searched his face, not for doubt, for truth, and found it. "They'll come back someday," she whispered. "Maybe," he said, "but not tonight." Silence settled between them, not heavy, not uncertain, steady, like something that had chosen to stay. Days passed, then weeks, No riders returned, no messages, no shadows on the horizon. The danger didn't vanish, but it moved on. And life filled the space it left behind. Lydia found her place at the North Star, not as someone rescued, but as someone who belonged. She worked beside Martha, managed the house, brought warmth into rooms that had long been quiet. And every evening Heath came back, not just to a house, to her. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, he found her standing near the fence, watching the valley below, the same place he had once stood alone. "You're still here," he said. She smiled faintly. "I chose to stay." He stepped closer, not rushing, not assuming, just certain. "I don't want you to stay because you feel safe," he said. "I want you to stay because you want a life here." Lydia turned toward him, her eyes steady now. "I do." The wind moved gently through the valley, soft, warm, and for the first time since that day in Sheridan, she felt no fear, only something new, something stronger, something she had never truly known before. Home. Heath reached for her hand, slowly, giving her time. She didn't pull away, and as the sun disappeared beyond the mountains, they stood there together. No longer a transaction, no longer a rescue, but a beginning.